Welcome everyone back to the Green Talent Forum here at Localized. We are so excited to have you on this forum. We're talking about opportunities, career options, pathways into the sustainable economy. We're joined by Lidiane Jones, the CEO of Slack, and Wajahat Ali, our wonderful moderator. We want to thank our partners, the Posterity Institute and Planet 2049, as well as our incredible sponsors who have made this all possible. We want to thank them for their work and for the time that they put into this event. Majid Al Futam, thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to you, Wajahat Ali, to take it away.
Thank you so much, Salma, and thank you all for joining us for what should be an amazing conversation with Lidiane Jones, who is the CEO of a very small up-and-coming company you might have heard of. Let me read this. Slack, I believe. Yes, Slack. Lidiane is a leader in the tech community for more than 20 years. She has been a product and business innovator across consumer and business technology brands, Salesforce, Microsoft, Apple. She has her fingerprints everywhere. She's an innovator and an amazing boss. But most importantly, folks, Lidiane is also a mom. And you know she's a good mom because she refuses to allow her kids to wear shoes in the home. And as a South Asian, a son of Pakistani immigrants, when I heard this, I'm like, Lidiane is good people. I could sit here and spend the next 7 minutes reading her LinkedIn profile, but that would mean we don't have any time for this conversation. So let's get right into it. Lidiane, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That was an amazing intro. I'll make sure my kids know they made it to the story here.
Yeah, and now they're like, oh my God, if I ever wear my shoes in the home, we'll be shamed.
Absolutely.
Lidiane, we have students, young change agents from around the world who are listening. And they find your story and just your presence incredibly just moving and powerful, right? But just be honest, right? There's a lot of kids watching right now, the young folks, and they're like, wow, Lidiane, look, she made it in Microsoft. She made it at Salesforce. She's a CEO of Slack. Huh. I can only imagine ascending to that station. Who am I? I'm nobody. I'm a brown-skinned or black-skinned young adult with a multi-syllabic name. My parents aren't that wealthy. I'm not a tech bro. Inshallah, one day maybe I'll dream, but it's not for me. But I can hope. But you too, many years ago, were once that kid in Brazil, and I love a great superhero origin story. So I want to take this DeLorean back to Brazil, and I want to go back to your home where you're young Lidiane, and you got parents who aren't tech bros and tech moms. Take us to that home of young Lidiane growing up with those parents in Brazil.
Well, it's really great to be here, first and foremost, and so great to get a chance to talk to students. So thank you for the opportunity. So I grew up in this part of São Paulo. You know, São Paulo is the biggest city in Brazil, so very, very urban. But I grew up in this part of São Paulo that's one of the poorest part of São Paulo, the East Zone. If you're from Brazil, you know what that is. My mom was a house cleaner. She had to do many jobs at a time. My dad worked in manufacturing and a mechanic, like various, on and off jobs. So it was, I was also not, picturing being at a job like this one right now. But I think, over the years, it's like if you have a goal, my goal was always to get an opportunity to build great product. Once I got a chance to get exposed to technology, I would discover more and more and more that I wanted to do. It was never to try to worry about whether I was going to make to the top of Mount Everest. It was, how do I get to that next milestone, then that next goal that I just discovered I can do, and then I would get to the next milestone. And it was always, throughout my career, it has always been about, can I learn something new? Can I have a big impact? And so it's been that way since the very, very beginning. And when I first started, it was like, oh, wow, I can do this computer class. I'm excited to learn more about that. Oh, I can go study that, deeper in high school. I want to do that. And as wow, I can apply for scholarships in the US. Like, I don't even speak English. So there was just always barriers when you'd find something else. But don't get deterred by them was, at least my thinking had always been that way. I do think that when I was in high school, gosh, I just didn't know how hard it was going to be. And to some degree, that was a great thing because it didn't stop me from making these big leaps. And then I would find myself in these really tough situations and then trying to figure out how do I actually make it work now. So I do think when I got here to the US to go to college, my first 6 months were absolutely the hardest because
Michigan,
I
right?
think Michigan, it was very cold. The food was really different. I actually met a lot of Middle Eastern friends during my time in Michigan. There was definitely not a lot of Brazilians there at the time. And I didn't speak English well enough. It was really, really hard. I couldn't, at the time in the late 90s, it was not easy to get in touch with my family. So I got to talk to my mom once a month for,
Mm.
a very small amount of time. And it was just really hard, but I felt that I couldn't give up because I had gotten this huge opportunity. And if I gave up, it meant I took someone else's, opportunity. So I felt this huge sense of responsibility not to give up. And so once you get past that, okay, I survived. Okay, I speak English. Things are, getting a little bit better. It was just how to make the most of that opportunity. And so it's always been my attitude is how do I make it to this next milestone? So I feel like, don't get tampered by what you think, a picture of a trajectory should look like. I think you can make it yourself what you want to be.
It's interesting you said that because, you're a kid, you don't speak English, you're in Brazil, your parents, based on what you told me, a house cleaner, worker, mechanic, not the ideal. I'm assuming you're not a trust fund baby, Lidiane, right? And you're a woman, also a brown skinned woman, and you're just dreaming. You're sitting there dreaming. Oh, maybe one day I can do it. And in the late 90s, you had access, you said, to computers, at least technology. What was your entry point where you're like, oh, this technology, I like it. And maybe I can ride this skill, this talent all the way from Brazil to Michigan.
Yeah, it's a great question because on the very first, I think I was 13 or 14, somewhere around that. We didn't have money for a computer, that was really expensive. So there was a little computer class near my neighborhood that I could learn basic. I had to apply for scholarship for that because I didn't have money. So it took me a long time to get into that program. And it was not amazing, but I loved it. I was so happy. I was the youngest person on that. There were only adults in that class, and I was, 13 or so. But I would go every Saturday. And then I asked my dad if we could buy a computer, which felt very, very expensive, for a family like ours. So he found a way to get parts, because you could build your own computer. So
Oh,
we
that's
built
awesome.
our own computer and bought little parts. But I felt like that was also part of my own education, is to not be afraid to go build a computer and get the different little pieces. And that became my very first computer.
And what
And
age? What age was that, Lidiane?
it was around 13, 14, somewhere around that. And that's when I first started to get into computers. And I thought it was just so amazing that I could do these things, that it was magical. And I've always loved math, but now I could apply it to something that I was excited about.
I,
Um,
I
so
love that. I love that. It's like for many of us who are children of immigrants in America, it's like, Mama, Baba, can you go can we go buy a computer? Beta, we will make the computer. Like, no, no, it's okay. It's like the Halloween Can we go to the store and get a Halloween costume? Who needs to buy it? We'll just make it. And the fact
it's
that your
so
parents,
true.
yeah, the fact that your parents did it, and the fact, what's so fascinating, I didn't know this aspect of it. It's a DIY. You did it yourself because you didn't have the resources that some of these people
Right.
do. Some of our peers, they come from some wealth and education. So you DIY'd it. You had the curiosity, you had the drive. Your parents support you. You're the young nerd surrounded by these adults, and you're learning, and you ride that scholarship. I want everyone to know she got a scholarship to Michigan. And when you land, what you were telling us is like you're a fish out of water. You're a fish out of water in Michigan. You couldn't speak the language, which I didn't know until you just told me. In that college environment, right? Because we have a lot of young adults here. We have some folks listening who will be listening who are in college. How were you able to find your voice and find your community or your tribe, especially as a quote unquote outsider?
Yeah, so I took lessons through a friend in my last year of high school, and that's how I passed the TOEFL exam. I did not
Mm,
pass the first time. I had to take it a second time, but I barely passed it, which meant when I first got to Michigan, I didn't speak English very well. I spoke a little bit, but not a lot. And so actually ended up finding that there were TAs and all of these resources at the university for helping kids. And I was just like there all the time. And what I had found is that the person teaching me whatever the class was also teaching me English, because I would be asking, what does this thing mean? And what does this other thing mean? And then I found other kids, to be very honest, my first year, I only had international student friends
mm.
because it was other kids that were going through the same thing. And so that's why I actually met a lot of Indian friends, Pakistani friends, Lebanese friends. So a lot of families and kids that had migrated also. There weren't a lot of Brazilians, but in my second year, I found out that there was a little Brazilian club. So I met a woman there, who was a student at the time. Her name is Melissa. She had also she had grown up here in the U.S. but had Brazilian parents, and we are still friends to this day. So and one of my Indian friends who had lived in Africa and then had migrated to Michigan is also one of my friends today. So I feel like those first couple of years, all of my friends that I made became friends for life, because you're just going through this really intense, immersive experience with, a set of other people, and you're exchanging notes, like, how are you making this thing work? How are you making this other thing work? It was certainly that way. I think it was only the last 2 years. And I had to be really resourceful in college too, because I only had a scholarship for the first 2 years. I didn't
Oh
have
wow!
it.
So you had to make sure you get the less you get fund the next two.
Yep. And it was a combination of things. I saved money from my internships and got a TA, like my last year, got a TA job. So the school subsidized the tuition. The third year, I had to take some student loans. It was always a combination of things especially the last 2 years. And so kind of like I had to make it work. But it was, you said tribe. It was really a lot of international students my first 2 years.
And the reason why I also ask that is because sometimes people think we're all alone by ourselves, but there's others going through it. And this is this particular forum that has been established by Localized, this amazing event that we're at. This is a global tribe. And so there are people, I hope, who can connect with each other and around the story and help each other out. But what's so interesting is, Lidiane, you struggle each year, your feet are in the fire, right? You have to move, or you sink. You got to survive, and yet you pivot. You get to Apple, you succeed, and folks, in 2022, you were tapped to replace Stuart Butterfield, who left Slack, the co-founder, and now you are the CEO. However, and I have to ask this, based on observation, you are not a white man, Lidiane. You are a brown. Am I right
I
about
can
this? I don't want to make
I
assumptions.
can definitely confirm that.
Okay, definitely. Okay, good, good. You heard
Confirmed.
it here, folks. You are a brown-skinned woman, an immigrant from Brazil who came here with nothing, couldn't speak English, created a tribe with fellow POC immigrant kids, and yet now you are the CEO of Slack. Now, everyone says pull yourself up from the bootstraps, lean in. But for those who are watching and listening, not everyone can lean in. It's hard for people, especially women of color, especially immigrants, to make it in this industry, the tech industry, which has the reputation of being very broy, a tech bro industry, with immense immense stereotypes and barriers. And especially as a woman of color, a leader as a woman of color and an immigrant, what are some of the challenges and detractors that you faced, and how did you overcome it to get to this position?
I think that for us immigrants, I would say more so. I think that's true for also some Americans that have grown up in past in challenging situations. But certainly, I think for immigrants, you have to learn to adapt a lot more than if you're in your own environment. And so I think adaptability and resilience becomes a really big part of our DNA. And certainly it was part of my DNA. And so when you're navigating, the tech industry, for me, it's always been, how do I stay true to my values so that I feel that I'm leading, even from the early stages, leading my work with integrity. That was always really important. But, this notion of leaning in, I'm glad you brought that up. I struggled with it for a long time because it's not, I certainly didn't grow up getting a reinforcement that I should be a leader, or that I, should be confident, or that I belonged in some of these places. So this idea of leaning in is just inconceivable, even.
And especially for people who look like us, I think it's important. In the 90s, in the early 21st century, we never saw ourselves as the heroes.
No, like you just wanted permission to even be in the room, or even be in the company. So it was always about trying to do the best that I could. So I felt like I certainly worked hard, and I still do. Like I can't even shake it that off anymore. But I think the biggest thing for me is every time there was a setback, it was just not to give up, and there's always setbacks. And so this idea of to have resilience in overcoming the set of challenges that come along the way certainly has been helpful in an industry that is very male dominated, very white male dominated, is to not give up and to lean on these things that have really shaped us, right? Resilience, having to be adaptable. These are very important skills on an industry that is ever changing. So I think we actually should embrace the fact that this, set of hardships and differences and flexibility and creativity that we have to build to, get here, to get educated, those things actually are incredible assets in industry that can be, really evolving all the time. So I think it is actually a strength that we should embrace and feel really good and confident about. But it takes time. And so my biggest advice is, it's okay to like feel uncertain. It's okay to feel like, wow, but I always feel that you belong. I think as soon as you can start, building that internal voice that will help you understand that you belong, everybody belongs. I think it shapes really your ability to just be yourself more easily. At least that was certainly the case for me. Once I got past this, I have to pretend that I belong here and really believed that I belong here, then I felt like I had this breakthrough.
I want to get to how you can build a culture of belonging and acceptance, especially in the tech bro industry, which, as you know, it struggled. But I want to go internal first, real quick, because you mentioned it. That there's an Arabic word, means waswasa, the whisper, and the whisper that comes, the inner golem. Who am I? I'm nobody. I won't make it. I'm just an immigrant. I'm a black and brown kid. I'm a goofy. I have a goofy accent. That voice in our head can paralyze us, especially when we don't see people like us as leaders, right? And so and sometimes the adaptability and the resilience and the strength, you try your best, but that voice can sink us. And so what was it internally, something that you were able to develop a script that allowed you to keep persisting and moving when that voice became too loud?
Yeah, there was a lot of techniques that I developed over the years, and it wasn't all obvious, immediately. But what I found myself, like a few years into post-college, into my professional work, I realized that I was thinking all these things that were just being said by other people. And it was frustrating me because I didn't have the courage to speak up.
Mm,
I was just really nervous about that. I was, I'm very soft spoken. I'm not very aggressive of a speaker. So, and I was in a very aggressive environment. So it was just really tough to even get a voice in. I realized that I needed to start just saying what I believed. And sometimes I was going to be right and sometimes I was going to be wrong. But the fact that I wasn't saying at all was holding me back. And it was really hard. So some of the techniques for me were very basic things. Like I would literally write down in this meeting, I have to say these three things. And I would
mm,
go in with my little notebook and then keep staring at it and say, I have a thing to say. And then would say my three things. And sometimes I would practice because I was so stressed about that. And over time, like exercising that, finding my voice. And so whatever technique works for people, it's all different for each one of us. But what is your strategy for getting your voice out? That starts to really, shake off that voice.
mm.
But at least for me, it was a breakthrough for sure.
And it's so important because so many leaders, especially women who have reached your position, and when I hear from them, they say that oftentimes they were the only woman, the only person of color, and they had to train themselves to raise their hand. They had to train themselves to take up space. And then it became second nature. And you as a woman of color who knew how hard it was to get in this space dominated by white men. We love white men. Some of our favorite friends are white men. We have nothing against white men. Now you have the ability to build a culture, right? And so the big words the last 2 years are DEI, diversity, equity, inclusivity. But I will say, over the weekend, I was with a bunch of friends who were in tech and corporate law firms and people of color. And they're like, listen, our companies say they care, they don't care. It's just, they just say these words, they set aside a budget and they do it just for public relations and HR. And we're sitting right there and we know it's all BS. And they just sit there and they nod their head. But how do you do DEI, Lidiane, in a meaningful way? And specifically you as a person who's gone through it, so that you say, you know what, that young kid at Slack, that young girl, that young person of color, it doesn't have to be as hard for them as it was for me.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought it up because this obviously is really dear to my heart. But you mentioned earlier that I replaced an incredible founder here at Slack, Stuart Butterfield, shaped a culture of Slack that was already a culture that genuinely means that we believe not only through our product but within our own team that we want everyone to do the best job of their lives. And when people can be themselves at work, they
Mm,
really will do the best work of their lives. And so we go through great lengths. Slack was one of the first products where the profile allowed you to put your pronouns, to put your picture, to express yourself
mm,
as a human. And we really believe that a lot of what shaped Slack as a product has to do with how the culture was built. And which is one of the reasons why I was so excited to come join Slack. I'm so honored to be asked to take on Stuart's, continue Stuart's work, because I profoundly believe that the culture has already been set in a good direction. But it really means that everybody in the team has a voice. And so we don't get it right all the time, Waj. Like,
mm,
sometimes we'll realize that we could do more, but everybody has the empowerment to raise their hands and say there is an opportunity to do better here, and that as a leadership team we care and we take action and we're transparent about what actions we're taking. So we do a lot here to drive not the publicity of it, but the experience that every one of our employees has. And opportunity, you talked about that. I think one of the biggest challenges in society today is that a lot of young people don't have access and don't have the opportunity to enter these incredible places. I feel like I made a moonshot, and it shouldn't
mm,
be a moonshot. It should be more open, more accessible. So at Slack, we certainly have done a set of initiatives to help expand the access to the workforce with our Slack for Good program. So right now we are partnering with an organization to help refugees get trained in software. And then after they get trained, they get internships, and then they may get offers right after. A few folks have just joined our team full time as part of that program. But it's really ingrained into our belief, and my personal belief, that everybody should have an opportunity to succeed. And so part of what I want to continue is, how do we increase that voice in the industry so that it's not just within Slack, but it is more pervasive, that there are meaningful, like you said, not propaganda, but meaningful programs that are helping train the workforce and giving opportunities for talent from around the world, which is a lot of students that are here today. So I feel a huge sense of responsibility in the role that I have now to continue to drive how important this is across the industry and how strategic it is for businesses. Because the more we have people with a broad set of experiences, with this idea that we talked today, resilience, creativity, broad perspective around the world, I think it's a much better success factor for organizations too.
Yeah, we want to make sure that your path, which, like you said, a moonshot, is no longer the exception; it becomes the norm. And I'm looking at the chat right now. We got folks from Uganda, Arishaba. We got Linda from Nigeria. We got Salma from Syria. Anyone who's watching right now, tell me where you're from. We'll give you a shout out. We have a global community here. And I'm supposed to end this, and I'm gonna ask Salma if I can ask you a final question. We got Abdul Wahab from Pakistan. Yeah, my family's from Pakistan. Saudi Arabia is in the house. All right. Salma said yes. And Lidiani, I know you're a very powerful, influential CEO, so I'm going to take another minute of your time. Please don't hurt me. But the buzzword, Kenya, Colombia, I love it. The buzzword nowadays is AI. AI, right? Hashtag AI. And you have Slack GPT. And I know Slack GPT, you're talking about, okay, it's going to be productive, and it's going to help sustainability, and it's going to be a game changer. But speaking about community, speaking about these young folks who are watching right now from Colombia, from Kenya, from Pakistan, what can Slack GPT do to also help Slack's workers, Slack's global labor force, right? Because as a writer, I'm sure you've been paying attention right now to the strikes, the historic strikes that are happening with the Writers Guild. There's some fear here that, yay, this is great technology, but this will completely flatten the workers. And some people are saying, well, actually, there's an opportunity here that maybe, just maybe, it could also help a global workforce. So I leave it to you. Convince me if you can.
Great question. I will work on that. And you gave me 30 seconds. So I appreciate that.
No, you have a minute. Take your time. 2
But
minutes.
honestly, our belief in AI, my belief is that AI, especially generative AI, can help reduce the time that we're all wasting on tasks that are mundane and don't really allow us to go deep on the craft of what we love. Look at this conversation that we just had. It would be so much better if you have more time to go deeper and meet people and understand topics and read about, just areas that you want to go deep as a writer, but you're wasting so much time on mundane research or mundane things that are already out there that you don't know. So my belief is that we have to build AI to help people be better at doing the things that we all want to do. That is to be more creative, that is to actually have more meaningful time with one another. And I think that's going to unlock a set of innovation that's more meaningful for society than what we have done over the course of the last 10 years. So I really, the set of capabilities that we're building now is to free up time for people to be better at the things that you do. If you're a developer, that you're being more creative at developing software as opposed to building test cases. If you're, a marketer, that you're spending more time on the creative campaigning portion of it. And right now, that tends to be the area that gets sacrificed. So that's what I really hope the technology industry would do with generative AI, is that really, create more space for human creativity.
Excuse me, I just drank water and I failed at it, so which is why I'm coughing, which is why you're the CEO of Slack and I'm a writer. But as we say, inshallah, I hope so. A final easy question before I hand it off to Salma. You are a fellow nerd like me and an avid reader. What is one of the best fictional books or comic books that you have read that you recommend to our global audience right now?
Okay, there is a book that I love. I have to remember the name. It's this book about the monkeys. Let me see if I can find it. It is the book that teaches you about the history of Latin America, but certainly Central America, different ancient societies. It's a really cool book, but it is also really funny and historically interesting. Let me see.
And as you find it, I will give this comment from Michelle Zapata, who said, "Not a question, but Lidiane, you're such an inspiration for us LATAMs, myself, a Mexican woman in general, and for the fact and effort that you thrived in another country with a second language."
Oh, thank you. I think that learning languages is amazing, but I have not been able to replicate my good English in other languages. So hopefully, I hope to do that. I will tweet later about this book because I can't find the name. But
All right,
it is
so
just a fun
Lidiane
book.
promises to tweet us this book that allegedly exists about monkeys that help us understand Latin America.
It's not even about monkeys. That's the funny part. But the book name has monkey on it, which is hilarious.
Thank you so much, Lidiane, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I apologize that we went 3 minutes over, but like we promised, this was by far a very cool conversation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Salma.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here. This was a very interesting conversation. We're so happy to have you here, Lidiane. Thank you so much, Wajahat, for your incredible moderation. And for everybody here at the Green Talent Forum, we're excited to invite you to our next event. You will be able to join the event that is on localized renewable energy and the transformation to electrification with the CEO of Rewiring America. You can join us now. Thank you again, Lidiane, for your time. Thank you so much, Wajahat,
The Lost City
energy.
of the Monkey God. The Lost City of the Monkey God. That's the book. She found it.
I found it. I found it. Check
so
it out.
Good.
Thank you all for being here. Salma, thank you for the opportunity. Really wonderful to meet you. Waj, wonderful to meet you. I hope we get to meet in person.
I hope so.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.